Welcome to Main Title Animation American Soldier. This is the first sequence of animation the viewer will see, and it's just important to really pull the audience in and capture their attention on this first frame. So with that said, I guess the pressure's on to make it really stand out. But hey, that's the challenge and we'll make it cool. So let's dive in. So the first thing we're going to do is bring a camera into this composition. We're going to make all the layers 3D. We're going to set a keyframe for the camera and then move down further in the timeline. I know that I want to make this camera do a vertical move. I'm also going to push in slightly on the scene. And based on the music, it might be cool to turn this frame into two separate scenes. So what I'm doing here is marking the timeline where a sound hit happens. These hits will be good places for something to happen in the animation. So maybe it's a scene cut or the camera jumps to a different position. Here I am back in the pre-comp, just adding the same markers in the same positions. So what I'm doing now is selecting the ink footage that's in the timeline, and I'm dragging it out so that it starts at this point in the timeline where I've marked something happens here. Replacing the ink footage with another piece of ink footage that I think may work slightly better. It's all about trial and error. Repositioning the ink. Trying a different piece of ink footage for this top layer. Trimming the endpoints of all pieces of footage. So I think what will happen here is I'll cut to a second scene at this point, which is why I'm cutting the footage in at this point. As you can see, there's two keyframes here as well. That's to help create a second scene point. So the first camera move will move up to down, top to bottom. The second camera move will be left to right. If it feels like the movements in After Effects here are going quickly, it's because I've sped everything up. Always feel free to play this back at half speed. I believe at half speed, you'll be seeing the actual speed everything was recorded at. Again, moving layers, repositioning layers, all trial and error. Because again, at this point in the timeline, something needs to happen based on the music cue. I do a lot of animation based on music cues. So that was a rough idea of what could happen. I tend to preview a lot to get the feeling, to help me decide what needs to happen. Here I'm tweaking the keyframes of the camera. So again, I'm roughing in the camera move for each of the 2 shots. The 2 separate camera moves aren't working for me, so I'm going to try something different. And you can see how things are rough here. The animation's super rough. You know, some edges of imagery are cut off, things like that, but it's not important at this point to get all those details right. It's important to get everything roughed in and kind of figure out what needs to happen. And that's what I'm doing. Here I'm playing with the different layers of texture over the image because I've decided that some of it just doesn't work. Some of it looks great in style frame design, but when it comes to animation, things may not necessarily work. And depending on the client, a lot of times you can get away with not sticking to 100% of the design. In fact, I don't know that I've ever worked on a project where we stuck to the design 100%. That's not to say that you should ever completely change the design. You're going to have an unhappy client at that point. But if things aren't working, they're just not working. So again, I switched out the ink footage again for the 3rd or 4th time. And play back again. That's looking pretty cool. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, it's super important that this first scene of animation, that we get it right, because this sets the tone for everything else. So I think that this first frame is actually the longest segment of the longest video because of that reason. I'm just trying to get everything just right. And even after I think it's just right, you'll see later on in this series, I'll come back to this more than once. I'll come back to this first frame and just revise and tweak, revise and tweak. It's all a process. Sometimes it's a maddening process. But it's always a great feeling when you create something really cool. Here I try using a plugin from Video Copilot called Twitch. Twitch has some cool capabilities. I think what I was trying to do here was create a film flutter effect, and I thought that Twitch had a preset. Yep, Bad Film Gate, that's what it was called. Really cool preset. I think ultimately though, I ended up not using it. Here I'm just tweaking the parameters of Twitch, turning the color mode off, adjusting the slide amount. all while previewing. If your computer can handle it, it's great to be able to preview a short scene while tweaking the parameters. You get almost real-time feedback doing that. I thought maybe I could use the twitch effect as a transitional element when cutting between the two cameras. So to me, the ink footage is definitely working, but the scene or scenes are just not dynamic enough. Here I'm stretching the time of the ink. Sometimes I use stretch, more often I use the time remap function in After Effects. It's easier to control the time precisely, but here I just wanted to do something quick. So you can see this kind of works. But it's just not working enough for me. Back to revising. I moved so quickly through the animation process of this that I didn't label my layers too well, and so you'll also see many times through the series I'm trying to figure out which layer is which layer. Really, you should always take the time to label and organize. I find that a lot of times I organize at the end. Okay, so what I have here is it's a reveal layer, or like a painted effect. I actually bought this off a stock footage site, and thought it'd be cool to incorporate into this project. Maybe to reveal some textures, to reveal imagery, things like that, or just to add another layer of dimension. I'm all about layering. So here I'm increasing the size of this image, and I think I ultimately end up bringing it forward in Z space closer to the camera so that it gives another layer of dimensionality using 2.5D. So as the camera moves, it moves at a different speed than the rest of the image. Just creates some added depth. I'm applying the motion tile effect, and I'm cranking up the output height. This tiles the image. So you can see there what the reveal did. It kind of wiped on a texture and it looked really cool. I'm a big fan of the camera lens blur. So here I am applying it. The problem with the lens blur effect is it can become render heavy. So just be aware, sometimes it can kind of kill your renders. But it does look really nice. I also use the lens blur inside the camera a lot of times, but I've really gotten into the camera lens blur plugin lately, so I've been using it more. So here I've added a new adjustment layer, applied the camera lens blur to it, and I'm setting some keyframe. Very cool. So you can see here I started with the Kodak texture in focus right when the scene opens, and then it's almost like the camera does a rack focus to the background image. Again, adding another layer of depth. It's all about the depth. Yeah, see, now I feel like this is starting to go somewhere. So again, just previewing, adjusting keyframes. I'm actually on a MacBook Pro here recording this. The lens blur effect really kills the previewing, but it's not too bad. I'm still able to move keyframes and get some feedback. I am fine-tuning keyframe placement on the paint reveal. You can see too that the paint reveal is not a 3D layer. And it's kind of interesting not being a 3D layer. So it's not moving as the camera's moving. It's like its own separate texture. Almost like it sits above the scene to reveal. I'm revealing the newspaper article inside the ink. Now I'm beginning to mess with the script font. And if you're curious on how I created all of this, I have another class called Main Title Design, American Soldier, and it shows this entire process. Okay, so here I'm using a piece of stock footage I purchased from a place called Footage Crate. I thought this explosion in the sky was super cool, and I definitely knew I could use it in this, especially when the sound hits. So I just plug it in to see if it works. And it's definitely working as a 3D layer. But what I'm going to do here is just put it underneath the right layer. Kind of blend it in better with the scene. Enable time remapping so that I can use it across the entire scene. A piece of, or an explosion like this could easily be created inside a plugin like Trapcode Particular. You could just use a preset, get the same kind of look very easily. So what's bothering me now is just that red and orange explosion, so I just add a hue saturation and drop the saturation to -100 to take out that color. So here I turned off the twitch effect. I'm extending some of the textures because I'm going to try and do what I was trying to do previously, which is add a second angle on the camera. So I delete the keyframes I had previously. Zoom in and kind of push over to the side. And here it'd be really cool to see the script font probably right on, like it's being written on. So I'll bring that in here. And again, I'm using the camera blur effect to do a rack focus on the second part of this scene. Again, if you want to watch at a slower pace and see all the keyframe action that's going on, just play this video back at half speed. My voice is going to sound kind of creepy, I'm sure, but you'll be able to see it recorded at true 100% speed at half. So this is cool, just cutting in closer. But it's not quite dynamic enough. So just messing with the graph editor can do a lot for a scene, whether it's an effect that's changing or it's a camera move, whatever. The graph editor is very powerful. So here I'm doing a faux camera move by, instead of animating the camera, I'm animating the type right to left. Looks a little weird because the background's not moving, but we'll get there. So to do the ride-on effect, I'm going to pre-compose this piece of type and bring it into its own composition. I find that that works better for the ride-on effect, which I'm going to use. The ride-on effect can get kind of weird when working in 3D or 2.5D. I'm also going to bring the position movement of the type back into the main frame 1 composition. Go back to the pre-comp of the type, make it 3D, paste the position data, and go back into the pre-comp, turn off the camera blur effect, paste it back on the pre-comp. Reposition so that it looks nice. Go back into the pre-comp and apply the ride-on effect. So this I'm speeding up quite a bit. I'm not going to create a tutorial on how to do the ride-on effect, but essentially what you do is draw frame by frame where the brush position will be to reveal the type like it's writing on. So you can see here what I'm doing. So the line of type doesn't have to fully write on. In fact, you don't want it to fully write on. You want things to not be 100% perfect. So if this was 100% perfect, you would see the write on begin at 0 and end at 100%, but that's not how, when you see that in animation, it doesn't register as that being real. It's too perfect, if that makes any sense. So here I'm taking back the footage to 100% speed and instead applying time remap so that I have some control over how this ink footage is playing back and how it's revealing other elements inside the scene. So I want that pop to happen right there where the music hits. Otherwise, it's kind of jarring to the eye. So if the pop of ink happens on the scene cut, it works good. So not having the background move was really bugging me. So here I'm applying another camera move. And this can move independently of the written type, since we already animated the written type. And see how that layer of texture in the forefront, how there's a line there? I think that works pretty well. That's a happy accident. Sometimes the happy accidents create the coolest moments. Here I'm trying another paint reveal. Again, trying to figure out which layer is which. So I like this texture layer on the previous shot, but not on this shot. I'm inverting the text to make it white. It's easier to see. And then just playing around with the placement. Just fine-tuning the placement of the text. It's all about these subtle details. That's looking better. Here I'm adding some footage that I'm going to place in 3D space and create more of an atmosphere. So here I replaced the footage with footage I have from, I believe it's Andrew Kramer's Action Essentials. It's just an atmospheric smoke thingy. Trying a different piece of footage here. Oh no, you can see that it adds quite a bit of atmosphere, as the name says. Kind of dirties everything up and puts this smoky haze. It's cool to add footage to a piece like this because everything is photo based. So when you add a little bit of footage on top of these photographs, it just, I don't know, there's something about it. It just really pops. It makes everything look cooler. So I'm trying some different overlay modes with the smoke, and then I'm duplicating them to really increase their presence in the shot, as you can see here. Now it looks almost like there's a bomb maybe that went off in the background and the smoke is left over, blowing in the wind. Now I'm just trying the smoke over the previous shots to see if it adds something to those as well. And I think I determined that it was just too much. So I took it off the previous shots, and I also reduced, I think, from 6 layers back down to 3 layers. It's getting closer. I felt like the scene was still lacking something. So my first thought was just to place more ink footage over the scene. So here I'm trying a blur effect on the ink footage to give it some more depth again. To fake the effect that maybe the ink is closer to the camera and a little bit out of focus. I try rotating it different ways. At this point, I'm really forcing the ink. And I find that forcing does not work 90% of the time. Again, I'm repositioning some of the textures. This is working better. I like how the soldier in the bottom right corner is revealed in 2 layers. The first layer is the kind of bluish black and white. The second is more of a brownish tint. Again, layering. Here I'm copying, pasting some of the text effects I had on other pieces of text and pasting them onto the handwritten text. Tweaking textures again. Tweaking the foreground texture, the depth layer. Cool, so adding that extra layer of texture in the foreground, it's out of focus the entire time, but it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's working nicely. The out of focus element adds a third layer of dimensionality. Gonna bring back some footage crate back in here, and this is just an explosion, smoke explosion shot that I think it's gonna help round out the this first shot. Set the transfer mode to screen. Yeah, that's cool. It's a little too opaque for me. I'm just going to drop the opacity down. Yeah, I like that. Cool, so this pretty much wraps up the first frame. I'm doing a few more tweaks to the tint color. I'm changing the text from black back to a white color, and yeah, as you can see there, it stands out a little bit better. Okay, let's move on to the next frame.